Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week for Illinois in Focus, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte and I will discuss the increased focus on public safety in Chicago and whether the Trump administration will send the National Guard, the Trump administration's executive order to withhold tax funds from jurisdictions like Illinois that ended cash bail, some economic numbers, and what to expect for October's fall veto session. All of that and more when we return for more Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Crime in the city of Chicago has been the focus of President Donald Trump this week. Nearly daily criticism of the city and state leaders not doing more to combat violent crime. Trump signed an executive order to defund jurisdictions that have no cash bail. He also said that he could send in the National Guard to address crime. But since he's hedged that, urging Governor J.B. Pritzker to ask for help. Pritzker and other Democrats have been pushing back, and joining me to discuss that criticism is the Center Square's reporter out of Chicago, Jim Talamonte. Jim, obviously this started a couple of weeks ago when Trump announced he was sending the National Guard to Washington, D.C. He said that Chicago could be next. Then Monday, he comes out with that executive order about no cash bail, ending funding for jurisdictions that have that, like the state of Illinois. But there's been just almost constant back and forth between Pritzker and Trump over public safety.
Yeah, it really has been quite a back and forth, and it seems like the more defensive that Governor Pritzker and other Illinois Democrats get, the more the president calls out Chicago, and even not just the president, but other members of his administration have called out Chicago. And we even saw Caroline Leavitt pointing out Chicago's crime numbers, talking about how much things have improved in Washington, D.C., that even the mayor of Washington, D.C., would previously been a critic of the president, thanked him for the federal presence of the improved safety, both perceived and actually data-driven. And Caroline Leavitt suggests that Chicago, and then she mentioned another city as well, that the numbers that the officials in Illinois are putting out there are not necessarily accurate, and that and this has been something that's been discussed by people on the ground. I've talked here in Chicago with the ladies from Chicago Flips Red who insist that the numbers are not correct, and that if nothing else, that non-citizen migrant crimes are not being counted, because after all, police aren't interacting in those situations. So a lot of back and forth, and time will tell if this benefits the governor. As we know, he has not only has he not ruled out a run for the White House, it seems to be almost a given that he's intent on running if it appears there's a pathway for him to have success. But at this point, with the president's poll numbers appearing very good, and the governor, most recent polling not being very good, again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But in the short term, it seems to be something that's not necessarily helping the governor here in Illinois.
Well, there's been some reporting, and even this morning, as we record this Thursday morning, you had the border czar, Tom Homan, seeming to confirm reports that there is going to be some kind of launching area, some kind of staging area for this at a naval base in the Great Lakes. Pritzker being asked about this, and he said that he hasn't heard anything from the White House.
He said there's been no phone call, no communication, and at the same time, there had been reports that we used to call it Great Lakes Naval Station, but this is north of Chicago along the lakefront in the kind of the Lake Forest area, so that north suburban area between Chicago and the Wisconsin line. But the Naval Station Great Lakes, it's been there for a long time. A lot of space, and there's been a lot of rumblings that this could be a staging area, not necessarily just for National Guard troops, but for other federal agencies, perhaps. So we haven't had specifics, but interesting that Tom Homan suggested that this isn't just, somebody making something up, or that there appears to be some. It appears that the federal government, or at least somebody in the federal government, is at least looking into this as a possibility. Would this be somewhere where, potentially Immigration and Customs Enforcement might line up, or could National Guard troops be positioned there? A lot of possibilities, but it's very interesting that Tom Homan didn't say no, there's nothing to this. And who knows? Maybe it's the back and forth game that's continuing between Washington and the governor. But it's certainly something we're going to be keeping an eye on, because while the governor has said, well, the president can't just send troops here unless there's an insurrection. But the president is saying, well, the governor should be asking for help because the crime is out of control. So it's been an interesting back and forth. And so it's just a matter of wait and see what's actually going to happen. We certainly don't think the governor is going to be calling the president after all the things J.B. Pritzker has had to say about the president over the past few months. I don't expect that phone call, but it would be interesting to see if the president authorizes some kind of move just to continue to demonstrate what he feels is the problematic government in Chicago and in the state of Illinois compared with what he's doing in Washington.
Well, and Pritzker even went as far as to encourage nonviolent, peaceful protests against any potential National Guard deployment in the city of Chicago, to which, the president simply just said, well, the Governor Pritzker needs to work with the Trump administration to address crime. A lot of statistics were thrown around this week. You had Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker both essentially highlighting that they've seen a reduction in the homicide rate in Chicago over the past 4 years, and other crime rates they say are down. But when they say that they don't even make the top 25 most violent cities, the Trump administration offering some different statistics, especially when it comes to cities over 1 million, highlighting that Chicago is top of the list and has been so for the past 7 years. When we get down to these statistics, does it matter, Jim, do you think? Or is it what's perceived on the streets by people who want to simply go out and enjoy the city?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of both, but certainly, the perception is a big deal, and that's even been discussed among people in the Chicago City Council who say, we need to feel safer. An alderwoman said, well, I won't let my 18-year-old daughter go downtown because it's not safe. And this isn't a conservative Republican, because there's no Republican in the Chicago City Council. And so, but boy, it was odd. As soon as the governor said that Chicago isn't in the top 25 major cities with high crime rates, boy, I don't know what, and he didn't go into detail, but I don't know what numbers he's looking at there, because Chicago had 573 homicides reported last year, most in the nation. Now, when you get to per capita numbers, no, Chicago's not number one, but it certainly is in the top 10. And so, so I don't know what, I'm not sure how the governor, where he was going with that, if he wasn't including homicide or what his numbers entailed. But certainly nobody in Chicago feels like, when Chicago has more homicides than New York and Los Angeles combined, there's a problem. And even though the numbers have come down, and a lot of people who are critics of the mayor, Brandon Johnson, have applauded the work of the police superintendent, Larry Snelling. And he said this week there needs to be communication. We need to cooperate with our federal partners. He's had to toe a very difficult line between trying to make the city safer, help make the city safer, at least doing what he can as the police superintendent, as opposed to his boss, who has obviously had a much different approach than the president of the United States. So, but in terms of feeling safe, it's most people on the ground here in Chicago, I think, still are very, very nervous. Transit ridership still down, and it's not just post-pandemic. This is because, especially when you come to the Chicago Transit Authority trains, there have just been too many incidents and too many times when people, even if it isn't necessarily a crime, just a disturbance of some kind, and there's just too much of that still going on for people to feel safe.
Clearly an issue that we'll continue to report on at thecentersquare.com. This is Illinois in Focus, talking with Jim Talamonte, a reporter for the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, editor of the Center Square, Illinois. Something else that Trump did this week concerning public safety, signing that executive order that would essentially have steps moving forward to have the federal government no longer fund jurisdictions that have no cash bail. Illinois is the first state, and I believe the only state, to implement no cash bail statewide. Now, Jim, how much money's at stake here? I'm not sure yet. We've got less than 30 days, I guess, before the Trump administration moves forward with freezing some of these funds. But this has been a contentious issue ever since the end of cash bail went into effect in September of 2023.
Yeah, and Illinois Republicans have been, bemoaning the end of cash bail in Illinois and have been calling for that to be revisited. And so that the president, if nothing else, has done a great favor to Republicans in Illinois by bringing this topic to the national conversation level. And because a lot of people around the state, and again, the no cash bail originated, I believe, in Cook County and then was picked up by the state. So again, another frustration for people outside of the Chicago area, seeing that the politicians in the Chicago area are sending their ways of governing to the rest of the state, and many people in the rest of the state not agreeing with those ways and finding that they're not working for them. So certainly, again, for a lot of the Illinois Republicans, I know you talked to State Rep Patrick Sheehan this week, who works in law enforcement and has several conversations with us and with others discussed the problems with no cash bail. So now you have the president of the United States talking about this. So if nothing else, it's inviting more conversation. But when you look at the backers of this, I mean, State Senator Robert Peters has been one of those really dug in on this issue. And he showed no indication this week that he was going to be doing any kind of negotiating or backing off on that. So it would seem to me that it's going to have to come from the public if it's going to happen. And then perhaps some change could come about. But who knows? You know, when you have a national conversation and you have the president of the United States weighing in, if nothing else, people are talking about it and paying attention.
And also the prospect of potentially billions of dollars being withheld from the state of Illinois over that state of Illinois policy of no cash bail. And just to highlight that, I mean, there was a story from CWB Chicago about a guy who was out on wearing an ankle monitor on pretrial release for a felony gun charge. And he's now accused of killing a man, again, while out on ankle monitoring for pretrial release. And CWB reporting that this is the 12th person accused of killing or trying to kill someone in Chicago this past year while out on pretrial release. I don't think we're not done with this story by any stretch, Jim. I think it's going to continue in the weeks ahead as we see what the federal government does with the federal funding. It's going to be continued reporting at the Center Square.
Yeah, and CWB has been tracking this. Those numbers, at one point, they were tracking it over like a 2-year period before this year. And the numbers in these kinds of cases where it was someone killing or trying to kill or shooting or trying to shoot, the numbers were in the 50s or 60s in terms of the numbers of cases with just like this one, a person out on pretrial release, whether it be an ankle monitor or just let go. One of the cases of someone just, the whole catch and release for people who are, have been detained for allegedly very violent crimes and being let out. And so, we've seen a number of these cases, and this was just the latest one that involved a murder and an ambush type murder, with the alleged, perpetrator of that crime being someone who had previous gun, issues and just a bunch of curfew violations. And there were a lot of red flags, and and a man is dead after nothing was done. So again, these kind of cases we'll keep tracking for sure at the Center Square.
Child welfare, another important issue, Jim, as we've both reported on this story, and I imagine we'll hear more about this. But State Representative Jed Davis highlighting the issue of interns being used, as he says, to conduct investigations of children in homes as part of Department of Children and Family Services. Davis says that he's familiar with one case where a child was removed from a home after an intern, an unqualified, uncertified intern, investigated and turned in a report. DCFS has been adamant that's Representative Davis has his facts wrong. But Davis is pointing back to documents from DCFS saying that this is a problem and it's opening up the department and the state to legal liability. This is interesting kind of to see how the legislature trying to hold accountable the executive branch, you don't really get much traction.
It's really remarkable. And if there's one agency in the Illinois state government that's had more issues than the Prisoner Review Board, perhaps, I would have to say it's DCFS, and probably DCFS. I mean, there's been issue after issue after issue, whether they be child abuse cases or now we see, Jed Davis and Jed, he was very, matter of fact about this. He didn't just come out, we see politicians on both sides of the aisle sometimes coming out, blowing smoke, but this is something that he was very, he didn't raise his voice, was very, when I talked to him about this, he was very, just very detailed in his explanation, not launching personal attacks, but saying, listen, we have people who we have documentation from DCFS saying the intern who handled this investigation did not have the proper documentation to be doing that work. And a child was removed from the home. He felt improperly. And DCFS, as you said, you're digging in on this, but it just doesn't appear that there's been any documentation from DCFS to back that argument up. And the picture here for state taxpayers involves potential legal issues, which could involve unknown amounts of dollars here. So definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on, because if lawsuits then come forward because of these kinds of cases where you have, if it's correct, non-certified or non-licensed interns handling these kind of investigations, well, that's a big problem. And that's again, the legal ramifications. And you're talking about families involved and children. It's just yet the latest DCFS mess that may require a whole lot of cleanup and could take a long, long time.
And Davis saying that he's going to try to seek legislative action on this to tighten that up, to make sure that there are only qualified people going to investigate these things before disrupting families' lives. And if that doesn't happen, he says there could be legal actions as well. And when I reached out to the ACLU of Illinois, which is helping monitor DCFS after a 1988 court case requiring monitoring of ensuring they're having quality operations at DCFS. The ACLU said they'll continue to monitor. They have not seen anything that's rising alarm right now, but they did say that they are going to ensure that those who are investigating are qualified. So we'll continue to follow up on that story as well. Economic news. Illinois has traditionally lagged the rest of the nation, Jim, but at thecentersquare.com, people can read some of the latest on how maybe the nation's economy is going to help kind of rise Illinois' economy a bit, although maybe not as fast.
Yeah, we have some interesting numbers this month from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. They do a survey of economic conditions activity index each month, and the July numbers were down rather substantially. But August, we saw a significant increase. Now, these numbers will go up and down, as you might have a stock market going up and down. And in talking with the principal business economist for the Chicago Fed, Tom Wallstrom, he said, well, this happens. We'll get big increases, big ups and downs from time to time. But overall, we're seeing more stability. There was an uncertainty earlier in the year, and now we're seeing that things are looking good. We've seen this indicator showing stable growth. That's what Wallstrom said. And then, just to be clear, the Chicago Fed, this isn't just Chicago. It isn't even just Illinois. The Fed's 7th district covers most of Illinois, all of Iowa, and then significant parts of Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So we're talking about a Midwest indicator. So obviously economic policies are much different in Indiana and Iowa than they are in Illinois, and then not to mention Wisconsin. But the numbers are just showing stability. And the Fed also did a separate national financial conditions index, and that was unchanged, and that suggests steady financial conditions. So there's been a lot of talk about uncertainty and ups and downs and all of this, but it just seems as though these economic indicators, which at least have no outward partisan basis, these seem to indicate that things are pretty steady right now. And we're seeing improvement in some key areas. Now, again, we still have, as you mentioned, Greg, some issues in Illinois, but at least big picture, regionally and even nationally, there seems to be more stability according to these latest indexes from the Chicago Fed.
Of course, one big driver of Illinois' economy is agriculture. And this week was indicator, a very large agriculture show, the Farm Progress Show, where Governor J.B. Pritzker was there, and he made some big announcements. What's going on with a new business that people have been waiting for a long time?
Yeah, the Farm Progress Show's biggest outdoor farm show in the country, and it's grown and it has a great economic impact. But at the show, the governor took advantage of the opportunity to announce that Cronus Chemicals is making a $2 billion investment in a fertilizer plant in Tuscola. This is in Douglas County, and that this would create 130 full-time jobs. Now, this project was first announced at least 10, I think it was more like 12 years ago. And just due to bureaucracy and red tape, the governor didn't talk about any of that, which is, these are issues we tend to struggle with in Illinois. But this, and the project is a long way from, this was not a ribbon cutting. This is an announcement of the project, which will take about 3.5 years to complete in terms of the build out and the construction. But this Cronus Chemicals facility, is expected to produce 950,000 short tons of ammonia each year. So we're talking fertilizer production. It would also include carbon capture and storage. That's something that's, drawn some opinions on both sides. But the governor said it's a major win for farmers and the people of Tuscola. Again, it's going to take some time for this to happen. But, I talked to a Republican chairwoman from Southern Illinois, Rhonda Belfort from Hardin County, and she said, well, if the governor wants to help farmers, we need to do something about the high property taxes, estate taxes, which are a really big deal. And, we all think of high property taxes. I think a lot of us think of homes. At least I do first and foremost. Some people think of businesses. But when you talk about property taxes for major pieces of real estate that are agricultural, well, you could be talking really big dollars. So, Rhonda Belfort said that if we want to help farmers in this state, we have to do something about high property taxes, estate taxes, and the layers of regulation. And she also pointed to the energy policy. She said when farmers, they depend on energy being affordable. When it isn't, it can drive them out of business. Or, as she said, she knows farmers and people who work in agriculture-related businesses who've left and gone across state lines just because of these kind of financial issues we're struggling with. So, that it's, we'll see, but it's going to be very interesting. Belfort said she stays to fight because she's hopeful that things will change. Illinois lawmakers haven't shown much interest, though, in lowering property taxes or estate taxes, though there have been some proposals to do that. Getting through the supermajority in the legislature just hasn't happened so far.
Yeah, definitely a lot of talk, but not a lot of action on the property tax issue. You've got just a couple of minutes left here, Jim, and we're going to have a lot more to say about upcoming veto session. And I want to encourage people, go to thecentersquare.com, click on newsletter, and get that newsletter in your inbox each and every weekday morning for those headlines. Because when veto session comes up, we're going to be right on top of it in October, and we're going to be watching two things in particular at this point, Jim. Of course, a possible veto that the governor made of a bill that the treasurer really, really wanted to have in place, but also the possibility of more tax increases to fund public transit. We got, about a minute and a half here, Jim. What do you think is going to take all the oxygen out of the room?
Well, the big looming measure I think that everyone's focused on is transit, but who knows? Lawmakers have been known to sneak things in under the radar as well. So, and we'll see if Treasurer Frerichs addresses the veto of the nonprofit funding pool.
And that's why you need to get that newsletter in your inbox and go to the centersquare.com on a regular basis and see what's going on at your Illinois State House. Jim, thank you for joining us today. And listeners can always keep up with these stories and much more at thecentersquare.com.